Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. There are mixed views about the national minimum wage. Labour Federation COSATU has proposed that the national minimum wage be increased next year by the average inflation rate plus 3%, while the DA says the national minimum wage hike will deepen South Africa's unemployment crisis. The 30th of September marked the closing date for the submission of written comments concerning possible adjustments to the national minimum wage for next year. COSATU Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks joins us again as we have hopefully re-established that connection. Matthew, thank you for joining us once again. You were talking a little bit about the impact of what not having this increase on day-to-day lives has on workers and how they are the ones who bear the brunt of it.
Yeah, no, hopefully you can hear me better now. Look, the minimum wage is a very critical poverty alleviation intervention. It's had a huge impact upon boosting the wages of 6 million workers across the private sector, from farm to domestic workers, from the construction industry to hospitality. These workers earn very little. They simply can't afford to survive when they see the rising cost of living. And we've seen it increase quite significantly in the past couple of years. We should also bear in mind that not only do they have very little disposable income, if any at all, but that the items that low-income workers spend most of the money on, electricity, has seen an 18% increase last year, 12% increase this year, possibly 33% next year. Petrol price has gone up significantly in the past couple of years, and that's had an impact upon food and other items. So for the DA to tell 6 million workers no increase, it'll be to plunge those workers into absolute poverty and misery, into high levels of indebtedness. That'll be an absolute disaster. It also makes no economic sense because if workers can't afford to transport and must walk long distances to work, they come to work exhausted. If workers can't buy the food or medication they need to be healthy, then how will they be productive at the workplace? And if workers can't buy the goods the economy produces, who exactly does the DA think is going to buy these goods from, our shoes or clothes or furniture or cars, etc.? As tourists are not going to come to South Africa to buy shoes. But also it's a strange concept that the DA is saying to the Commission, don't increase the minimum wage, because the Minimum Wage Act specifically requires, there's not a voluntary option. The Minimum Wage Commission has to adjust the minimum wage for inflation and to protect its value from erosion. So the DA is basically inciting government to break the law that Parliament passed whilst the DA was there. But I think for us, there's neither here nor there. The DA is being hypocritical because when government tabled legislation requiring the CEOs of large companies who earn about R1 million a day, just to disclose that to the public and to disclose what they pay the lowest income workers at the bottom, the cleaners, the security guards, etc., the DA refused. They voted against it. They cried blue murder. So I think for us, we don't need to pay attention to the DA's rantings. They are defending the wealthy, the captains of industry. That's their prerogative. But I think for civil persons, we have to defend the rights of ordinary people who live in desperately poor conditions. And the minimum wage is a critical tool and it's been used successfully across the world, from the US to Brazil to Europe and so on. And it's helped to reduce poverty and inequality in South Africa. It's helped to stimulate the economy because when workers have extra money in their pocket, they go to the shop and they buy goods. And that helps for businesses to make a profit, helps businesses to pay their own staff and to reinvest and to grow. So I think for us, we're not worried about the DA's theatrics. They're unfortunate, but that's the democratic right if they want to be anti-worker. But I think for us is making sure the Minimum Wage Commission does adjust the minimum wage by inflation plus, ideally plus 3%. And we make sure we focus on compliance and deal with those employers, like we saw George and Balito and other places, who choose to break the labor laws and choose to pickpocket workers. And I think for us it's about focusing on compliance. I think from there, that's where we're going to take it.
What's your take on government's negotiation approach as, you on one end call for this national minimum wage and government's argument on their end, and of course raising questions around affordability?
Yeah, so the minimum wage had a lot of discussions going on beforehand. There was extensive research done by independent experts, academic experts from WITS, from UCT, and that's why we were able to reach a consensus on the initial 20 rand an hour and the transition phase for farm and domestic workers who were pegged at 90 and 75%. And it was precisely done that way. It said it's large enough, it's high enough to make a difference to workers. You don't want it to be so low that it makes no difference. But we also wanted to make sure it wasn't too high that it led to automation, led to workers being retrenched, or simply just seeing employers ignore the law completely. So it was a delicate balancing act, and that's why we're able to find consensus. But we also agreed at NEDLAC in 2018 that it must be adjusted by above inflation each year to make sure it's protected from erosion by inflation and make sure it retains its poverty impact. Since that time in 2019, there's been extensive research done by independent academic experts who have shown that it has not led to any significant job losses. And in fact, in the agricultural sector, or even the domestic workers, you've seen actually job increases. But where you have seen job losses is because of other issues. It's because of the issues of load shedding, the challenges of transit freight rail or the ports, or dysfunctional municipalities, or COVID-19, the global economic crisis. That's been the cause of unemployment. So it's slightly disingenuous for the DA to pretend none of those things have happened and somehow want to scapegoat the right of a domestic worker to simply be able to buy a loaf of bread. And we should also weigh up what is the cost of not having a minimum wage. We saw a decade ago when farm workers in Durrans in the Western Cape were paid as little as R6 an hour. That led to a violent uprising, huge amounts of losses to the local community and so forth. So we should be careful of paying people a slave wage. And the DA's economic logic makes no sense to any person who's sober, because they're paying workers peanuts, a slave wage. If that creates jobs, then surely when we inherited the party regime in 1994, we should have had full employment. Instead, what we inherited was a devastating, deep structural unemployment, which hits Africans and coloreds, especially the hardest, and women, and so on. So it doesn't make sense. A race at the bottom doesn't go anywhere. But what you need to do is to make sure everybody has enough to be productive, has enough to buy the goods the economy produces, and so forth. But paying people a slave wage, that benefits no one except the bosses.
So in efforts to reach some sort of common ground, what happens from now? What happens from this point onwards as you try and find some common ground?
Yeah. Look, we are convinced we will find common ground. So the National Minimum Wage Commission has received public comments by this past Monday. At the National Minimum Wage Commission, you have representatives from organized business, from labor, from community and independent experts, as well as the Department of Employment and Labor. They will make a recommendation. They normally do find a majority consensus position, and at times we even found consensus unanimous, including with our business colleagues too. Not always, but there always is a majority. The Minimum Wage Commission will then make a recommendation. It will go out for public comment for one last time. We hope by the end of November or beginning of December. Then it goes to the Minister of Employment and Labor, and she will then have to make the final decision and then gazette it publicly. We want this to be done as quickly as possible because we do want to give sufficient notice time to employers because there is a financial impact. They need to adjust payrolls. We also want to make sure that workers, shop stewards, etc. are aware of it. It's normally been increased from the 1st of March each year. We normally try to push a little bit earlier. But look, it will be done. It's required to be done. And I think for us, what's a very positive announcement as well on Monday by the Minister of Employment and Labor is that she intends to increase the number of labor inspectors from the current 2,000 to 20,000 over the next 3 years. And that's going to play a very positive role in helping to enforce compliance with all of our labor laws, not just minimum wage, but also occupational health and safety, basic conditions, the whole basket of that. And we think that's going to also help ensure the working conditions of workers improve, and that also we actually improve productivity at workplaces too. As you address workers' grievances, workers will be more motivated and also feel more protected as well.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, COSATU Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks.